Hi and welcome once again to Wesley Impact. On the programme today, I'm going to be reflecting on part of the 4th chapter of Philippians in the New Testament. That concludes this short series. We take a look at Wesley Missions' pioneering care with the inception of the worldwide counselling service Lifeline. And we meet our guest, who's going to share a little of the roots of Methodism and his heart for the future of the church. On the 7th of October 1817, the very first Methodist church in Australia began as a result of the work of Reverend Samuel Lee. Rev Jeff ministers not too far from Milton in Staffordshire in England, where Samuel Lee was born. Jeff's in Australia on sabbatical and he joins me in conversation. Jeff, it's a delight to have you on the show.
It's always to be here, Keith.
Look, before we talk about your own story, can you take us a step back in time? You know about this guy, Samuel Lee. What to you is interesting about him?
I think one of the interesting things is if you were to go to Stoke-on-Trent today and mention the name Samuel Lee, virtually no one would have heard of him. And I think that's a tragedy. Stoke-on-Trent, for those who don't know, it's the home of Robbie Williams, or if they follow soccer, Stanley Matthews, Reginald Mitchell, who designed the Spitfire. But there's this great man who's almost slipped unnoticed into the pages of history. Samuel Lee, back in 1817, it was just a village where he lived. And for a man to have a heart that burned for Christ, that he was on the planet for a reason, I think you could say he felt that he'd got to go. He'd got to take this gospel message. But the interesting thing was, it wasn't on his horizon to go to Australia. He was going to head for North America. But at the time, I think Britain and France were at war, and they felt it was too much of a risk for him to make the journey to North America. And so one of those, I think, divine interventions rerouted him to Australia. And I think it's true to say that the ship he would have travelled on to North America actually sank.
Absolutely the case.
And I think that you look and there's a scripture that talks about God deciding the times and the places where people will live and work and minister. And
he came here and we had the first Methodist circuit here. This business of circuits doesn't mean a lot to people today, but tell us what it really means.
Yes, I mean, we now have a collection of churches that are fairly local and we call it a circuit. But back then, these circuits could be a couple of days' ride on a horse away. And there's some amazing stories of the preachers of the day who, if they were going off to take a service, as I say, riding horseback 50 miles or more, and they might stop on the way, knock the door and share the gospel with the people in a house.
And of course, the circuit riders in the outback of Australia, it was real adventurous stuff. But this Wesley mission that we're a part of is very much a legacy of Lee's. Do you recognise anything of that legacy as you look at us today?
Yeah, I think that at the heart is this idea that you can make a difference, that an individual can make a difference to another individual, that a group of individuals can affect a society. Lee very much answered a call. He answered a need that people had communicated from Australia. If you don't send someone out to us, we will die in our sin. I know it's a quaint sort of phrase that puts it in that period, but I still think that the ethos of Wesley Mission is, you know, if somebody doesn't come and help us, we're going to struggle. And certainly spiritually, we're still facing the same, if you like, spiritual death. And there used to be a post that says it is the life before death. And I think that it's the two things. It's not just the eternal dimension. It's here and now. Can I make a difference to someone's life? Can I answer a call? And what I've seen while I've been in Australia is all the places where Wesley Mission does that.
Is there anything that struck in your mind and say, gosh, I'll remember that?
I think it's the individual stories. I think it's the. I think if you're going to talk about Lifeline in the program, and I think that you're helping to bring something that very often people would like to put away, put in a corner somewhere, and say we don't want to talk about mental illness, we don't want to talk about suicide. And I think when you let a balloon up that says this represents someone who couldn't face life at this moment, and they took their own life, and you're bringing that in the open. And Lifeline, I mean, you may talk about me at some point, but I used to work in mental health and I was responsible for a Lifeline.
Great to talk. I'm looking forward to coming back talking a little bit more about your own ministry, but I'd like to, at this point, introduce today's performer. Ryan Day is a worship leader in Sydney and has chosen a very fitting hymn by Charles Wesley. Sit back and enjoy Love Divine.
Love divine, all love's excelling, joy of heaven to earth come down, fixing us, Lord, your humble dwelling. Oh, your faithful mercies crown. Jesus, you are perfect compassion, pure unbounded love you are. Visit us with your salvation, enter every trembling heart. Love so amazing, so divine, no greater hope my heart could find. It demands my soul, my life, my all. There's no greater cause, no greater cause, so complete in us, your new creation, pure and holy, let us be. We have received your great salvation, perfectly secure in thee. Love so amazing, so divine, no greater hope my heart could find. Demands my soul, my life, my all. No greater cause, no greater love, so amazing, so divine. No greater hope my heart could find. Demands my soul, my life, my all. No greater cause, no greater cause, no greater cause.
Keith Garner's new book, A Word for the World, is now available. Dealing with the 4 themes of success, sorrow, society and spirituality, the 16 sermons in this book will definitely inspire and challenge you as you read. The book also includes a DVD featuring interviews with Nick Farr-Jones, Lee Hatcher, Tanya Plibersek and Margaret Somerville. For more information on A Word for the World, please contact us on 9263 5555 or at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
And interestingly, Margaret Somerville has just died, 101 years old, in that DVD we talked about. Also, if you'd like to know more about Ryan's music, details will be online all this week. Jeff, you and I were together at college in Wesley College, Bristol, a few years ago.
A few years back.
Tell me a little bit about life before that and how you felt called by God into ministry.
Yeah, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. My father taught me a lot. He was a great one for looking out for the underdog in life. When I went to church, I certainly wasn't seeking Christ. There was a young lady who I'd taken a shine to. So I went there. She left and went to college, nothing that I said. But I stayed, and I stayed because the people I found there, it just blew me away. They weren't talking about Jesus, they were talking to him. He really was that real to them. Never experienced anything like it. And in my teenage years, I had depression. When I grew up, I was hugely, I was obese, not to put too fine a point on it, and I'd got a huge inferiority complex. I was painfully shy, and I couldn't speak to people. When I became a Christian, when I invited Christ into my life and the Spirit touched my life, well, you can see now you can't shut me up. And the call to ministry, again, I could not imagine standing up and speaking in front of people. When I was at school, I had to just announce the Lord's Prayer once, and I was shaking so badly. I stepped back when I'd said, well, now say the Lord's Prayer, stepped against a wall panel, put all the lights out in the school hall, everybody cheered. So to feel God's calling me to preach, I laid a fleece before him, as Christians would say. I went to a conference at Cliff College, which is somewhere that's dear to your own heart, and said, Lord, if you want me to be a minister, please send somebody along who will ask me that simple question, one person. I put my case on the bed. When I got there, there's a knock at the door. There's a lady stood there with her back to me. He said, will you zip me up, love? And I didn't know what to do, so I zipped her up. She turned around and screamed and ran off. I thought, well, that's great, isn't it? But I saw her sometimes later, and she'd been through a painful thing, and she was telling me all this, and then she said, are you going to be a minister? And I knew in that minute I was. She felt blessed that God had used her, and I felt blessed that God had called me. Okay,
so you're now ministering in the potteries of England.
Yeah.
It's known there. Tell us a bit about, in just a short time, a little bit about your ministry today.
Yeah, it's in a place called Longton. There's a huge central hall, which it's a large building, and it's got a glorious history, but the present hasn't been too promising. The congregation has dwindled, and so I've gone back, and I felt God has called me there, laid it on my heart. This is going to become a mission church. We're going to preach the gospel unashamedly, but we're also going to actually reach out and touch people's need. That idea that General Booth had, that you can't preach to people who've got an empty stomach, well, I don't think you can preach to people who are struggling to pay the bills, who have got all sorts of pressures in life. So we've started things like we take in school uniforms from various local schools, clean it, repair it, and let people have it donation basis or free. So we're taking some of the financial pressures, because Stoke is a very, very poor area. It was, when we first went there, it had just been voted the worst place in England to live. But there's people praying around the city, and things that were identified as problems, we have seen them answered. We've seen jobs, we've seen life expectancy that has gone up. There's all sorts of answers to prayer that we've seen, the headlines in papers, testimony to that.
And some of the biggest evangelical Methodist churches are in that kind of area. And
yes.
we're reaching out and longing for Longton to be part of that story.
That's right. And I believe, as I say, just as Samuel Lee was called for a time for a work, I cannot but believe that God has said, I want you here for this. And there are some incredible challenges. There are great needs in the area. But we've already just seen those first fruit.
Jeff, it's been a delight to talk to you again. I came out to Australia on a sabbatical, and I went back to England. They said, what's it like? I said, well, I couldn't live there. And I've been in 9 years today, and I think that's really quite something, to see how God uses it. I hope your time in Australia has been very creative also. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's been 200 years since the first Methodists met in Australia. To celebrate 2 centuries of faith and pioneering care, CEO and presenter Rev Dr Keith Garner takes us back to where it all began.
But we don't begin here at the heart of London. We begin in a town in the north of England.
In this fascinating narrative, Rev Garner chronicles the history of the life and times of the founder of Methodism, John Wesley. This fresh and thought-provoking documentary takes us on a journey throughout the United Kingdom, beginning in John Wesley's hometown of Epworth.
John Wesley was born here on the 17th of June, 1703.
This 1-hour DVD travels onto his education years and beginnings of social justice in Oxford, to his final years in London. For more information on John Wesley, the man and his mission, call 02 9263 5555 or email us at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
Wesley Mission builds on the foundation, stands on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. As we've heard, Samuel Lee began his pioneering work in Australia, passionate to help set up faith communities, to help the marginalised and the broken. The Lifeline movement is one such legacy that remains strong. Let's take a look at Wesley Mission's work in establishing this vital service.
Lifeline was born when we discovered the power of the telephone.
A new £40,000 Lifeline Centre is opened in Sydney by Lord Mayor Jensen. The centre, a project of the Methodist Central Mission, will maintain a 24 hours a day service to people who want help, and particularly people with emotional problems.
Well, originally, Alan Walker, he had people calling him day and night. And he called a group of us to his home at Roseville, and he said, now what can we do? I can't cope with it. They're ringing me at the office, they're ringing me at home, people suicidal, people with all kinds of trouble. And so there we met and discussed this situation. We prayed, we talked, we met, I don't know how many times, until someone said, why don't we have a central spot where people could ring and we could try and help them through that, have someone on a telephone. And that's how Lifeline was born, virtually. Then after organising everything, what will we call it? Someone said Lifeline. This is a lifeline, throw out the lifeline. You know the hymn? Throw out the lifeline, yeah. Someone is thinking today.
The Central Methodist Missions Fellowship House in Sydney starts a Saturday night teenage cabaret. There's a capacity crowd of 550 teenagers, and the £65,000 community centre is really jumping.
Well, actually, my wife and I were involved with teenage cabaret and all sorts of things. We said, no, we haven't got time to serve on Lifeline. But we did the training, which was very simple in those days. And Lifeline had been going 2 or 3 days, I think, when they called us and said, oh, look, we need your help. So we started then. We had a trouble team to go to these people. Counsellors couldn't send the trouble team. We had to have a referral officer. So it was referred, and then if permission was given, trouble team went to them.
Lifeline is an idea that has gone international. Without intention or planning, it seems, spreading out on the Sydney pattern, centres have established themselves across Australia and round the world.
Alan wrote a book, How Jesus Helped People, and that was our basic training. And that's how we started. We were rather naive, but I believe we helped many, many people. And that was all that built Lifeline into what it is today.
Even though Paul is writing to the Philippian Christians from captivity, the epistle radiates joy. If there is one good reason why the church in every day and age should revisit this epistle, it would be a corrective to the notion that religion is a miserable and dour affair, that it must be inhabited by sour people, and it's dominated by troubles rather than opportunities. So in that context, let me read to you from Philippians chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you know I love and long for you, my joy and crown. Stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. I plead with you, Euodia, and I speak with Syntyche, to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, I ask you, my true companion, help. These women, they've commended and contended for the faith at my side because of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of the co-workers whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is right, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. There's this real sense in which he is commanding himself and others to understand that we must rejoice in the Lord. This joy is heightened by the return of Christ, which is clearly expected very soon. We read that in verse 5 in this particular chapter. Instead of worrying these early Christians, they're commended to reach out to God in prayer. A very powerful thought is that of concentrating upon those things which are the best in life, namely truth, nobleness, rightness, purity, and whatever's excellent. I like those words, whatever is right, because clearly that's what we want to be about. These are the kind of Christian virtues which we see are critical to the total life of Wesley Mission, and certainly in any mission context where we're reaching out for Christ. I think one of the challenging thoughts of this epistle comes as Paul writes about his contentment with what God has given him through the life he's experiencing. Later in the same chapter, he expresses his gratitude and says, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Now, that to me is one of the most challenging of thoughts, being content. Well, sometimes that's the one thing that we're not. We hear it all the time, that discontent. And so it isn't really a fanciful thought in their particular context, any more than it's a fanciful thought throughout the history of the church. Paul has harnessed the lesson in the reality of his situation, and he's learnt that secret. And the secret is what gives him strength. Now, I think the strength is important. Let me read to you verse 13. This is a key, really, to the whole of this epistle. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learnt the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Those words have much to say to you today. Most of us are not in a prison context, but I know one or two do watch this program in that kind of place. And the reality is that the lesson that God is teaching us and making clear for us is whatever we understand by contentment, that calmness, that peace, that serenity, that real centering on God and finding for ourselves what we're really and truly meant to be, that comes as a gift from God. Thankfully, the gift of God's presence and grace is available to each one of us.
If you would like to know more about today's topic or for more on Keith's message, contact Keith by writing to Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A5555, Sydney South 1235, or email impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
Many thanks for joining us on the show. We leave you with Greg Atwell singing Be Thou My Vision. Till next week, goodbye. Have a great week and God bless you.
Say